Welcome back to the library, children. You know, human beings often walk around thinking they're so important that everything revolves around them. Well, really, you're just insignificant insects, and in tonight's story, you're going to realize that. So join me for a story so terrifying it will make you realize just what your place in the universe is. MCA officer Nina Jackson watched the sea of green lights from behind the brim of a coffee cup. A big collapse was imminent, so Desmond, her only co-worker, had insisted on going downstairs to check the racks, and specifically the old Bakelite solenoids for cracks, just in case something went unrecorded. On the rotunda's mahogany walls below each light, of which no more than 3 have ever gone out at once, was the name of something of cultural significance. Each name was etched into one of thousands of tiny rectangles of obsidian plastic. Recessed into the center of a large wooden desk in the center of the room, and where Nina now sat, was a single speaker. Soft, discordant notes issued from it, making accidental tunes as they rang out. Desmond had suggested it sounded like Javanese gamelan music. In truth, it was the sound of the universe, or rather universes, bumping into one another. Nina downed the dregs of the coffee and fought back a yawn. She found herself staring at the nameplate of an obscure Argentinian diplomat, the light bulb above confirming that he was at this time still dead. Nina lit a cigarette, choosing to believe it was still the 1970s, and for a couple of days last month it had been. The trouble with accepted reality is that it wasn't nearly as persistent as most people thought. Parallel universes collapsed into one another all the time. As a result, things displaced one another to become accepted truths, and this went almost unnoticed. The one true alpha universe was deceitful, transient, and a place of messy compromise. Despite this, most days at the Ministry of Continuity Anomalies were quite mundane to observe and record. On occasion, however, if a pan-universal collapse happened overnight, the ministry itself would have been established somewhere other than where she had left it the previous day. Nina enjoyed the challenge of the commute. Pulled from her thoughts by something in her periphery, Nina turned to look. Lights began blinking out, first 3, then 4, then 7. It continued, no longer a whimsical melody, a single recursive ringing, like feedback was now coming out of the speaker. It was getting louder. Nina swore, trying not to panic. MCA officer Darrell Warren watched the wall of red lights. Desmond had gone downstairs to check the solenoids. At least the last collapse had been much smaller than expected. The alpha universe was hard to predict. There was only one light that now sat unlit amongst the familiar sea of red. Nina Jackson, its little nameplate read. He stared at the spreadsheet on his laptop, trying to decipher the figures on it. You must get this completed and sent to me by close of play today to hit your target. I looked up to see my boss standing over me. He was a large, fat man who could be an intimidating character when he wanted to be, which was most of the time. I turned to him and nodded before returning to the task at hand. He waited a few seconds just to reinforce the fact and then disappeared back into his office. I didn't see any problem with the timescales because I had done this report many times before. I knew it inside and out. But not this time. Something didn't add up. The spreadsheet looked the same, but the numbers within it made no sense. I called one of my colleagues over to sanity check what I was doing. He simply glanced at it and shrugged. "Dunno, mate. Never done this report before." Shrugging again, he wandered back to his seat. This means he was going to have to go to his boss. He was reluctant to do so, but really had no other choice. Dropping him an email, he was surprised to get an almost instant response to come and see him, asking that he send a copy of the report as well. Knocking gently on his office door, he got a terse "yes" before entering. "Sit down." His boss seemed nervous. Pimples of sweat appeared on his forehead, which he used a handkerchief to mop up. He stared at the report on his screen for a few seconds before asking what the problem was. "The figures have been massaged and are creating a false impression as to the profitability of the company." "Oh," he said. "Are you sure you haven't made a mistake?" 100%. I've checked and rechecked. I've done them many times before." His boss pulled at his collar. "As you can see, I've copied in the CEO as well." His boss suddenly stood up, panic-stricken, and dived out the office window. "With all due respect" is the perfect way to start a fight, but this time it wasn't necessary. My good friend and solicitor had already metaphorically punched me in the mouth when I asked him to help me. We had been at school together, played rugby together, had been to many functions together, and had grown up together for over 40 years. Together we had planned many things, including my defence for an employee who had sued us for constructive dismissal. I knew he was a hard man, because the employee had stolen money from me, and I had decided simply to let her go rather than humiliate her in public about the underhand way she had stitched up me and several of her colleagues, fellow employees. She had been managing our new pension fund, but after the initial setup had been allocating other people's contributions into a fictitious account set up in her name. I had repaid everybody else's stolen contributions myself, and then advised the wealth managers, as they appear to be called, that she had been allocating false sums for her own benefit. Without a police crime reference, they had been reluctant to interfere with the company pension fund, but after a very high-profile meeting, including my solicitor, they agreed to freeze the misappropriated funds for 7 years, in case the thieving bitch decided to take action against them. My friend's advice had been nothing short of brilliant, and his fees had not been excessive, considering the circumstances. He had helped me sue a bank that had been charging wildly outrageous fees because their computer programmers had written software that was creaming money off of my client's funds and placing it to the credit of a mysterious accountant that was being used to launder funds to a programmer employed by the bank. But all of this was overshadowed by the punch delivered when I asked my solicitor to represent me in my divorce. His reply was, "Now that would be a conflict of interest." "Why?" I asked. "Because I'm representing your wife, who's going to marry me." Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode. Now run away, children. Run away back to your beds and get some sleep, if you can. I'll see you next time in the library, if you dare.